Welcome, everyone, to the Fractional Talent. 1 year later, disrupting the 40-hour work week. Today, we're going to delve into the past and future of the tech market. It's been a tumultuous year. It's been a tumultuous couple of years in the technology market. And we started Fractional Talent a year ago, just slightly over a year ago, as a solution to a technology market that's increasingly becoming fragmented and disrupted. And we've had some tremendous findings and some very interesting findings. We found a significant amount of success, and it didn't come in the way that we envisioned. So today, I'm going to tell Kate where she was wrong, and she's going to be more than happy to tell me where I was wrong and the predictions we made in last year's webcast, in which we made some pretty bold predictions about the future of talent and why we felt so excited about launching this venture, Fractional Talent. So if we move ahead to the agenda, we've got an action-packed, probably 35 minutes or so, and then we'll open up the floor to questions. We'll go through our intro and bio. Welcome to everyone. It's a pleasure to see you all. We have a big crowd here today, and we thank you for your time. That's the greatest gift of all. We're going to go through a quick intro bio. Kate and I will introduce ourselves. We'll go into some of the 2023 predictions that Kate and I made, where lo and behold, we were right and wrong on some cases. Then we're going to talk about what I think is most interesting, and that's the market trends that we've seen over the past year and what's coming to fruition, where we see this market going. We're going to close up this webcast with where do we think this market's going, and we're going to make a series of bold predictions for 2025 as well. With that being said, Kate, take it away.
Yeah, well, welcome everybody, and thank you, Tom. We are not fortune tellers, but we had a great time last year trying to be bold about some predictions, and so this will be fun to see how right or wrong we really were. I'm Kate Lewis. I am an entrepreneur. I've been out on my own now about 3 years. I founded Connections Consulting Partners in May of 21, and then came together with Tom as a co-founder of Fractional Talent, like he said, a year ago, in May of 2023. Really focused on helping businesses by enabling them with the right blend of solutions, using talent, technology, AI, in a consultative manner. So that's me. That's who I am. Raleigh, North Carolina is my home.
And I'm Tom Merck, a 22-year professional in the technology services industry, ranging multiple verticals from utility to financial services, as mentioned, technology services, and healthcare tech. I founded Shadow Hornet Consulting about 3 years ago, and joined forces with Kate to launch Fractional Talent as an opportunity to take advantage of a increasingly fractured technology market and providing fractional technology services to that market. So we came together last year. We envisioned that we'd have some success. I think in many ways, we've had much more success than we thought, but it certainly didn't come in the way that we envisioned. And we're going to get into why that was here shortly.
All right. So we shared the video from last year of our webinar if you had a chance to view it. If not, I'm going to include it at the end and you can go back and rewatch it. But we made a couple of bold statements. And so here are our 2023 predictions. The first one is Tom said, as tech budgets compress, the demand for top talent will increase to do more with less. All right, Tom, do we think you were right or were you wrong?
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty well. Yes.
Sorry.
I was certainly wrong about this, and this was a big premise for launching Fractional Talent. We envisioned that tech budgets were going to be slashed, and they certainly were. They've been slashed for 2 years. We've seen operational budgets slashed in some cases by 40 to 50% from even major companies. On average, I'd say probably about 20% in operational budget reduction. So we felt that there would be some increasing demand for top talent because companies had to do more with less. They still needed to get that work done, and they needed people who had done that work before to effectively and efficiently guide them. Well, that didn't happen. What we're seeing is that the demand for top talent in the marketplace has eroded at a pace potentially we haven't seen over the past 20 years. So demand still exists in the marketplace, but the demand for top talent, and that's highly credentialed, that's highly experienced labor, has actually diminished. And Kate, you've seen this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We know a lot of colleagues that are very senior, very, like you said, educated, credentialed, expertise, and they were the ones that were impacted, during layoffs and restructurings and are still in the market looking for new opportunities. I think companies are still trying to hire entry level, earlier in career, less expensive, less experienced resources at this point. All
Definitely.
right.
And we'll get into that. All right. Prediction 2, was Kate right or wrong? As 2023 advances, we will see more adoption of the gig economy with less emphasis on traditional career paths, particularly from boomers and Gen Z. Kate, were you right or wrong?
I think I was right here.
You
Uh,
you are absolutely right.
Yeah, we've definitely seen with the rise of the layoffs and the rifts, with all those, we talked about senior technical executives in the job market. We have a lot of colleagues that Tom and I have worked with in the past in our network that were VP level technologists, 20 plus years of experience that have been in the job market now for 9+ months and have turned to consulting as their next career option. So fractional consulting or freelancing as a second career or late career option, as opposed to continuing to sit on the sidelines and wait for that next VP level or leadership position. So we've seen people on both ends of the career spectrum, the earlier in career Gen Zs who already don't have trust for big corporations and don't intend to work for the same company from graduation to retirement, as well as the boomers opting for a freelancing or consulting career path as a better career option that provides more freedom and flexibility. So like hooking your horse to one wagon is no longer the ideal scenario here.
Yeah, and Kate was really emphatic about this last year. And if you look at last year's presentation, she detailed how the economy is going to evolve into this gig economy and how corporations are going to adopt more of this type of thinking. We're starting to see some early signs of that, but this trend is actually confirmed by both the Federal Reserve and the Small Business Administration, which indicated small business starts are at their highest level over the past at least 30 years. So that's confirmed by Federal Reserve data. So that's exactly what seems to be happening. Unemployment for senior level professionals is creating or it's leading to individuals starting their own businesses. So certainly Kate was right on this one. We have to give her credit.
I like being right. All right, Tom, you're up for prediction number 3. So you said unprecedented inflation will lead to declines in tech job wages over the next 3 years. Did we think this came true?
We were I was definitely right on that one. Absolutely. So in last year's webinar, talked about how the inflation that we had experienced for wages over the past 18 months and 12 months in particular exceeded that of any period in recorded economic history since they started keeping statistics at the federal level. And what has happened is when the FANG companies who largely led that in the war for talent, they led that wage inflation. When they started laying off substantially, it created a cascading effect. And we started to see some elements of wage collapse, and not dissimilar to what was seen in Japan in the 1990s. So we're seeing some pretty shocking things out there right now. Kate, just last week, we had an opportunity with fractional talent where individuals are making around $180,000 as director, higher level individuals looking at a job opportunity. Were being considered for the same level of work, but we're actually being offered a salary of, was it 95 or 105? It might have even
The
been lower.
salary range that client was willing to pay for was $95,000 to $145,000. And so, yeah, the individual that was the candidate that they liked, there was like asking them basically to take a $40,000 or $50,000 pay cut to take this opportunity.
And we're seeing this in several opportunities. We're seeing this in several industries. The amount that companies are willing to pay, if they are hiring at all, is absolutely sub 30% of what we were seeing at the heights of the economy, and in some cases more. So I think this
Yeah.
is going to continue, and we'll get into that. But I was 100% right on that one, and that doesn't often happen, as my wife would like to say.
Right. And it's going to take a while, right? We overpaid and inflated salaries in 2021 and 2022 during that boom, right? And housing prices and everything were on the rise. And so it's going to take a while for expectations of salaries to adjust. And companies kind of held their own because they couldn't adjust everyone's salaries and overpay, right? The FANGs may have overpaid, but not the normal businesses and operations. And so we've seen this like 20 to 30% disconnect between salaries companies are willing to offer and salary expectations of employees, right? And it's going to take a while for that to balance and even out.
And job seekers should adjust their expectations. And that is
Yeah.
the reality that we're facing today. Unfortunately, for those who attained some pretty high salaries in the past, they're definitely likely to face that as a challenge.
Yeah.
All right, on to the next. High wages and cut budgets will result in more fractional, non-C-level talent acquisition. Fractional talent below the C-level. Was Kate right or wrong?
This was the premise of our whole business model, right? And so I'm going to say I'm wrong, but I'm going to say maybe we're too futuristic and we were ahead of our time and we just need to wait for the market to catch up on this. So I'm currently wrong. I'll take the mistake. I'm not too humble to admit failure, but I still think we're onto something here. Companies are used to buying fractional CFOs, fractional general counsel, legal counsel, maybe even fractional chief marketing officers or outsourcing marketing. But they're not really comfortable yet to hire the fractional technologists. So we've proven we have this supply of talent that's interested in the fractional work, but our supply is currently exceeding the client's demand for it. And we've found that some companies are sluggish to adapt flexible fracturing hiring methods in order to be able to engage our fractional consultants in a different than traditional hiring model, right? We want to do outcome-based, project-based, retainer-based, short-term engagements, drop in and get out, not get fully embedded long-term into your company. And so our clients that have listened and understand that there's this flexible, cost-effective fractional option are ahead of the adoptive curve. And we've had success with those clients that are nimble enough and flexible enough to adopt. But there are some bigger companies that are still struggling with this new concept of breaking free from traditional hiring methods.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen forward-looking companies who've been able to look outside of their traditional administrative processes. So the procurement process is definitely a blocker right now because fractional buying is not well understood. And so that's absolutely hurting companies. Also, their business model. If they've built their entire business around an FTE or contract model, fractional is somewhere in between, and they have absolutely no processes, systems. Even the people who are recruited into that organization and run those organizations don't really inherently understand fractional. So it becomes a barrier in the buying process. And even though there's a lot of potential to use this talent and achieve more, we're seeing some reluctance from some of the mid-level companies, and some of the companies are going to be slower to adopt this. That being said, we saw a lot of success for our fractional resources, but they didn't come in the way that we envisioned. And we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're currently wrong. And I think it's going to take maybe another year or two for the slower adopters on this one. All right. Tom, prediction number 5 was yours. I think since we're taking turns, job fractionation or treating different parts of a job separately and sourcing them will be the next trend. So this is that concept that we came up with about job fractionation, of breaking apart that rainbow unicorn butterfly kitten image of one person that can do a laundry list of unrealistic job expectations shoved into one job into, 4 different people that each have their own expertise coming together and delivering it as a project or as a team, right? So this was our major concept, job fractionation. What do we think? True or or right or wrong?
Wrong again. Wow, not boding too well for me. Yeah, definitely we're seeing some signs, some early signs that this is happening. So being able to take a large scale, complex job role and say, look, there's certain aspects of this job that are unrealistic that we can outsource, or we can use another entity to perform this role and pay less for that role. And then we can get the value of having multiple providers. We can source that differently. But if you think of the complexity with our current human resource administration systems, our enterprise resource systems, our procurement processes, you actually create more work in the administrative area to be able to achieve that value. So another area where companies that are either burdened by enterprise resource systems that are not flexible enough to adapt, or companies that can't break out of that mold, and think about sourcing in a new way, they're not going to be able to unlock this value. And we think a large portion of companies are going to be trapped here and are going to have to evolve quickly. I think we're probably, I would estimate 3 to 5 years out from seeing fractionation as the next trend. Again, ahead of the curve, but a little bit too far out ahead of the curve.
This is where we think the differentiation is for what we're trying to do, but we have a couple of companies in mind, and I'm not going to call out names here because I want them to still be clients and companies that think that because there's so much news of unemployment and layoffs and there's so much talent in the market that they can wait for the perfect candidate, and that the perfect candidate exists. And so that there's this conception that I'm back in the driver's seat as the hiring company and the employer with the opportunity, and I can wait and just talk to everyone that's available and find this diamond in a rough, needle in a haystack perfect person. And the fact is that the people that were being laid off are not necessarily the right skill set that matches the roles that are currently open. And so there still is not this rainbow unicorn butterfly kitten, is my example that I love and probably need to trademark, that's available. And so it's again adjusting the way that companies are looking at filling the talent gaps and the resource gaps and the skill gaps on their team, creatively instead of traditionally. So this was our innovative way, and we're currently still wrong, but maybe by 2025 or 2026 we can turn this into we were right, finally right. All right, Tom, I'm up.
Definitely. Prediction 6, and I'll note we have 2 questions or comments in the chat that we'll address right after this prediction. So prediction 6, Kate, companies will turn to fractional talent solutions to modernize and upskill rapidly. You're pretty confident that was going to happen. Were you right or wrong?
I'm overly confident in a lot of things, Tom, but and this one, I'm going to give myself an A on being correct with this prediction. So we have seen companies continue to outsource and look for expertise from consultants with adoption of new technology or upskilling their team. We see some of those technology skills being really hot, like Salesforce, ServiceNow, Office 365, Microsoft Dynamics. Another example, AI and machine learning and LLM, large language models. We have a client at Fractional Talent that this is a good example, that needed an external expert to come in and bring the latest security expertise to advise his VP of networking to help them build their 3 to 5 year technology roadmap and succession plan. This person had been with the company for 20 plus years, was going to retire, and the CIO was not confident that he knew enough of the latest trends. And so we were able to partner with this customer and provide that expertise to provide that guidance, because they're still in the real world, day-to-day outside perspective, to make sure that they had that right knowledge and expertise to do the planning for their next 3 to 5 years for their team. So I think companies are still looking at ways. It's not always hire new, it's upskill and train their team. And I think we have those senior level technology and business leader and experts, and coming in as a consultant or an advisor, or even putting on a training hat and upskilling a current team to that latest technology trend is somewhere that we were correct with our predictions.
Yeah, and this might seem like kind of a contradiction. We said a lot of companies aren't able to utilize fractional talent because they're burdened administratively. But what we're seeing is the companies that get it, and they're willing to make bold bets and they're willing to cut through that bureaucracy. And they're seeing a tremendous amount of benefit. As Kate mentioned, this modernization use case where if you have staff who's performed a certain function with certain skill sets and you've recruited at the mid-level and you've expected them to grow, and they might not have grown fast enough because the market's been so disruptive and you've seen the emergence of AI. We're seeing a lot of demand for companies to say, bring me in some experts very quickly so that I can upskill the level of service that I'm providing to my customer and expand the account that way. So by providing our value, they're able to take advantage of new opportunities. We're seeing a lot of that, and that's with companies that get it, who are willing to, as I mentioned, cut through that bureaucracy and some of their administrative processes. So those are our predictions. All in all, I think we had a mixed bag.
I agree. I agree. So do we have questions that we wanted to interject now before we jump into the market themes? Okay.
Let's jump in. We have three to four questions here, and I think it's worth going through each. So the first is, how do you, as a job seeker, know how much of a pay cut you should take to match market demand?
That's a good question.
I can answer a couple of ways.
Okay.
Kate, one is you should just know that going into a job offer, you're likely to get a number that's lower than what you would expect or what you would have attained a couple of years ago. So just knowing that you're going to see an offer that's 20% below is important information. You should be prepared for that information, and your willingness to negotiate, you're going to have to determine that based on your personal circumstances. So a big question is, how long can you sustain not having a job? Because what we're seeing right now is, with the lack of hiring in the marketplace, an offer is great and it's somewhat rare today. And this is my perspective, Kate, you might differ, but if you have the financial resources to be able to stomach another 6 to 9 months of unemployment, you can maybe be more aggressive in that negotiation. But it's not atypical to see someone with a high degree of expertise, resources, 20 years of success, be unemployed for as much as 14 months is what we've seen in this case. So that's my perspective, Kate.
Yeah, and my perspective is, I think I'd like to advise people is know what your budget is and what your standard of cost of living is and what it takes and what that must have number, that's kind of your floor, and what you used to make, and they'll kind of know your buffers and your boundaries. But I think that there's a lot more push for salary transparency and pay transparency and questions that should be verified up front about what is this position willing to pay. And then you need to see if they're giving you other benefits, other perks, flexibility, if it's going to be less stressful, less work. Some of us come from this work hustle, work culture where we're doing 60, 70 hours and crazy long days. And so like, if you're going to take less, then you're going to be giving less hours or time or expertise to the company because you're doing a role that might be less. And then again, I think the biggest thing is consider that nothing is forever. No job is forever. And is this something that will work for you in the short term, thinking more short term than long term? It might not be ideal, but is this a side bar, side path in the woods for a year or 2 years until we can get into a better market and you can make a better move? And are you willing to take that, side journey or side adventure? But this is not meant to be recruiting help, but it's hard because it's just like housing prices, right? Right now, our houses are worth in a lot of places. My house is worth more than I think it's worth. And I'm like, oh, should I sell my house and cash out now because it's a high market versus what my house was worth 3 or 4 years ago? Salaries are kind of fluctuating with the market demand as well. Vidya, you asked about confidentiality issues because of working with multiple competitors in a fractional capacity. So a lot of times we're signing NDAs and IP. We're not using the customer names. We're not sharing IP. You're still a contractor working, and whatever you're being exposed to is confidential, but you have your knowledge and expertise and process and mindset that you're bringing to those clients. And we don't, usually have a fractional consultant working at direct competitors. They may not even be necessarily in the same industry. And companies are always cognizant of what they're willing to have an external contractor resource have exposure to and work on versus an internal employee. I know several companies that I've worked with in the past that R&D, product development and engineering with IP that company sells for revenue is never going to be given to an external consultant. Usually you're coming in and advising on something that's more, externally facing or strategic in nature. I don't know, Tom, if you have a suggestion to that question.
I'm actually surprised to see how little confidence. So an NDA, a blanket NDA, is usually sufficient. And I honestly would be more concerned than some of our customers and prospects are about this issue, but we're not seeing it as a major barrier whatsoever to fractional adoption at this stage. It's an excellent question and one important one, but I don't see it as a barrier. We'll go through the next two ones quickly, and then we'll move on to market themes. So, what advice would you give to new college students graduating in 1 to 4 years? The market is changing so rapidly, and I think the best thing I can say is ROI is vital. Critical thinking skills are absolutely vital, and some degree of knowledge of an industry is much more important, I think, than it's ever been in technology. Being able to blend a solution with the industry and the specific industry problems, meaning you have to understand that industry's problems at a much deeper level. And you can't just expect that some analyst or someone else is going to tell you as a technologist. You have to blend the technology and the solution set and the context of the business that you're serving. And if you do that, you're somewhat immune from the disruptions. I mean, development is rapidly changing because of AI. So don't rest your laurels on any single language or set of language. Rest your laurels on your ability to apply a technology solution or any solution to an industry problem to generate ROI.
Yeah, I would agree, Tom. And I think we hit a little bit of that later in our next section as well. But it's the things that can't be outsourced or that are human intelligence, not artificial intelligence, right? So communication skills, presentation skills, solution oriented thinking, creativity, those type of things we're seeing, the soft skill, what was previously considered to be more of the soft skills as a higher demand for, as well as leadership and conflict resolution and, some of that management and planning stuff too.
Maybe the two biggest deficits I see are in leadership. So being able to lead, communicate effectively. I saw just a shocking survey that said 19% of employers, it was a big survey too, 19% of employers had experienced a parent attending an interview with a candidate.
I saw that. No, for kids, for Gen Z, like the newer in career interviews that they would bring their parent to the interview.
Yeah, and 53% took a call, or 42% took a call or checked their phone extensively during an interview. They could not make eye contact. So some of these basic communication skills that we've taken for granted for years, and the ability to bring different types and diverse types of people together to lead them, that's a huge gap in the market. And anyone who can focus there is probably going to be well served. And critical thinking, the ability not to just take answers or not just to take solutions, but to ask questions. Why are we doing this? What if we did it this way? I don't understand. Being able to say, I don't understand. Could you explain that more? That's vital right now, and that's missing in the market. We'll move on to the last one, then we'll go on to market trends. Are we seeing fractional talent adoption more at the small and medium enterprise scale rather than large enterprises?
Good question. I think yes. I think it's always easier for a smaller business to be more of a trendsetter and early adopter. I think it's harder to steer a large ship, right? And to make a change. There's usually less bureaucracy and tape. Although we do have a client that is, we do have global fintech customer as a client, and pretty large clients. I think our target audience for fractional talent and consulting is that mid-market, where the decisions can be made at the executive level to adopt a new way of, like we said, a new way of thinking, a new way of doing work.
I'd answer by saying flexibility in the budgeting process. So if you have to go through a structured budgeting process in which you have to designate your hire, your investment level in a certain area like consulting and draw from that, we're seeing a lot of challenges with big companies being able to tap into those budgets because they're unplanned for expenses, or there's a set target reduction to improve EBITDA or to reduce headcount. And those numbers are hard and fast, solid. You're not going to be able to get through them. But if companies have flexibility in the budgeting process and a willingness to work through that, we're seeing adoption at the large company level, north of $1 billion, north of $3 billion, as well as at the small and mid-sized level. And we've had some pretty good penetration in each. It came in the way that we didn't expect, which we'll get into. But that covers the questions, Kate.
Great
Let's
questions.
move on to
Yeah.
trends.
Great questions. Thank you all. All right. So market themes. Tom?
Yeah. I'll succinctly say that the war for talent, which characterized 2020 through late 2021, in which FAANG companies were desperately trying to get the most talented people, pull them away from companies that they'd been at for a while, offer them exorbitant wage increases, 40, 50, in some cases over 100% in total compensation. There was a war for talent that quickly turned into something I would characterize as none other than a war on talent right now. The American technology market is experiencing a war on talent. They're fighting for their careers. They're fighting for relevancy against a backdrop of an industry that largely wants them gone. And I have a couple of pieces of evidence, but you could pull out 50 or 60 articles recently that emphasize this point and reinforce this point. Just 3 days ago, Microsoft announced 1,500 workers blaming the AI wave. 1,500 workers, I believe that was in their AI division, so related to practical applications of AI, laid off 1,500. Well, look at their stock price. Their stock price is nearing an all-time high, very close to an all-time high. And if you look at the trend over the course of the past year, they've been nothing but an upward surge. And in fact, their stock price has almost quadrupled over the past 4 years. So their returns are exceedingly increasing. They're delivering shareholder value. At the same time, they engage in massive layoffs, and they've continued that drip of layoffs all the way through last week. Even the high-skilled AI personnel are getting laid off in this environment. So another interesting article, Bamboo, who's a pretty big name in human resources and human resource data collection, they have a lot of data collection from a large number of tens of thousands of customers. 26% of executives, I think it was on average, but it said 32% of managers admitted the main goal of return to office was to additionally lose employees. So employees that they were not willing to lay off because of bad press, they wanted to bring them back into the office so that people would become so dissatisfied that they quit because they're not wanted. And that's the sad reality right now is a lot of staff is not wanted, and companies have proven they can generate exorbitant returns for their shareholders without human labor. So the war for talent has absolutely, in my opinion, become the war on talent. Kate, it's an aggressive stance that I'm taking, but it's something that I supported with 50, 60 articles of data in preparation for this. You have any comments there?
I like it. No, I agree wholeheartedly. And yeah, we all have personal experiences of friends and colleagues that we can share stories of for sure. So, all right, next market trend.
Yeah. So maybe to illustrate the war on talent, American tech labor now is simultaneously battling on three fronts. So everyone knows AI. AI, I think, has become more of a disruptor than many are willing to admit right now. And just in the past year, AI has been used to scale financial analysis AI has been used by the University of Michigan to deliver course content and grade course content. AI is absolutely replacing a lot of code-oriented tasks, and emphasizing the importance of architecture, but de-emphasizing the importance of development. So American tech labor is battling against AI, and AI continues to see a massive amount of capital flow into it. We'll talk about just how much in a few slides. They're also fighting simultaneously against offshore nearshore. So it's projected that as many as 6% of jobs still could go offshore, and that's largely India. That's less Eastern Europe, but that's Southeast Asia as well. So 6% of current IT jobs could go there over the next 3 years. And nearshore has increasingly become a destination. Major companies invested in 2019, 2020, 2021 in infrastructure in places like Chile, Colombia, Peru, Uruguay, Argentina to a lesser extent. So there's a forecast that as many as 4.2% of American jobs year over year could be reduced from nearshore threats. So you stack that together, and you're fighting against those two major factors and an overall demand decrease for labor. So the decrease in labor demand may be precipitated by offshore nearshore and AI, represent three fronts in which the American worker is challenged. Talent was once seen as the key to the future over the cloud era over the past 10 to 15 years, maybe a little bit more. Applied hardware is increasingly seen as the key to returns in the 2030s, and we'll illustrate that in a few slides. Kate, do you have any comments there?
Nope, I agree. And the nearshore outsourcing again is the competitive risk, right? For the people that have lost their jobs and the jobs that they've decided are too expensive now in the US market that are going to lower cost countries. And I think we have a slide later that talks about AI centers of capabilities that places like Amazon and Microsoft are putting in Latin America. So
absolutely
see that as an absolute threat.
Yeah.
I had already advanced. Now I'm
If
advancing.
you go into that one, so just really quickly, if you look at this, the layoffs over the past couple of years relative to the financial returns on the Information Technology Index, the XLK, which is an aggregation of most of the major tech firms and their returns, it's gone straight up since hitting a bottom around early 2023, and those returns have been astonishingly good. We've seen great results out of Microsoft, Google, certainly NVIDIA, and Amazon has been steady throughout that time frame. But if you look at the layoffs, the aggregate layoffs in the industry, they increased to a peak of over 260,000 last year. They're on pace potentially to exceed 140,000 this year. And previously, in the year before, that they were around 140,000. So when you look in the aggregate, we may have lost 600,000 U.S. tech jobs over the course of 3 years. Some of those may have been replaced. The data is very hard to identify. But if you look at this trend, I think this trend will continue. Financial returns are being generated while labor demand is decreasing. Well, total aggregate labor is decreasing, financial returns are increasing. Can that trend be sustainable? It looks like it can be. Financial performance has increased, labor demand has decreased, labor capacity has decreased. It's not necessarily a positive trend. I think one that's very favorable for fractional talent, but not a favorable trend for the U.S. tech worker.
Well, favorable for the stockholder, not favorable for the employee.
Certainly.
All right.
And last, hardware, not people. So if you look at the amount of tech spending that has that has siphoned into the AI ecosystem, and that's largely GPUs, NVIDIA GPUs, that's semiconductors, obviously bolstered by federal investment in the semiconductor industry. Tech spending, you would have expected with the number of layoffs to have diminished, but if anything, it's increased. Capital expenditures increased in technology. It's not in a recession. By no means is tech spending in a recession. Capital investment is increasing. That capital investment used to go to cloud enablement, application development over the past 10, 15 years, big cloud development efforts, software development efforts. That CapEx now means buying NVIDIA GPUs, investing in data centers, investing in electric infrastructure, network infrastructure to enable those data centers and that infrastructure. And that doesn't require as many people. So the Magnificent Seven have invested $100 billion in Q1 alone in that ecosystem. And that money's not going to cloud enablement, it's not going to software development. So it's being spent, it's just not being spent on people. A negative trend for the US tech worker, perhaps a positive trend for shareholders and tech companies in general, as long as it's sustainable.
Yeah, and we talked about, the move back to data centers and the cost of infrastructure build outs to support AI, and like we talked about NVIDIA and the energy consumption. And so it's going back to, again, owning the hardware, owning the servers, owning the network and the software to support the amount of data consumption that would be happening.
Yeah, it's creating new growth opportunities in tech. It's just not in the traditional area of software development, to some extent architecture, those sort of things.
Yeah. We don't want to point all to a negative picture, though. We're going to try to spin it positively. So the sky is not falling. The sky is not falling. We also wanted to point to what we've seen in the market responding unconventionally. So we've seen that specialists are in and generalists are out. So what companies are willing to spend money on and hire on is industry experts, technology experts, people that are hands-on keyboards, still technology and domain expertise. They would rather a specialist than a broad generalist. And I think this is counterintuitive a lot of times to the people that I talk to that are in the market, is they want to be able to appear broad enough to apply to a lot of different jobs and don't want to be narrowly focused where they would miss out on an opportunity. But the people that are very specifically domain expertise, industry expertise, those are the ones that are in demand. We talked a little bit about the blend of technical skills and business acumen. Companies aren't necessarily wanting to train or hire or invest and ramp up new hires. They want people to kind of come in and hit the ground running. And they're hiring for, we talked about those soft skills, the communication skills, the presentation skills, people that are solution-oriented problem solvers, the process improvement, how you're going to do things more efficiently, a lot of around operational efficiency, process improvement. We talked about there's this gap of managers being able to handle conflict and doing conflict resolution. So that skill set, a lot more on analytic reporting and documentation. ROI is in, right? Companies want to make sure that they're getting what they are investing in. And then we think companies are reevaluating what's real and devaluing the potential. So we're seeing less investment in dollars in theoretical or experimentation or proof of concept projects. There's less investment in innovation and research, R&D projects. There's only investment happening in projects that have an impact directly to revenue or cost savings or operational efficiency. So less of this like exploratory, let's try something out and see if it works. Less of those, hackathons and idea, investments where you can win a grant and go off and work on a side hustle. And like, we're back down to brass tacks. Like, what are we doing to keep the lights on and keep the business functional and operational? And then there's also a little bit more of an investment in those customer facing front of the house roles. So sales, marketing, solution architecture, professional services. They're willing to hire people that are going to still be in the front of the business. And then surprisingly is this rise of blue collar jobs. And so for a lot of reasons, and we'll talk a little bit more about the devaluation of college degrees, but we're seeing a lot more of the Gen Z and the new college graduates interested in the trades and the blue collar jobs as opposed to wanting those corporate jobs, and that there's more investment dollars into plumbing, electrician, HVAC. We talked a little bit more of the infrastructure bills and the grants that the government is funding to do better with roads and energy and telecommunications and infrastructure build outs. And so we see the rise of this blue collar worker. And I'm also seeing people later in their career shifting back towards maybe blue collar worker jobs. So there was a man that I was reading about that after over a year of unemployment had started to pick up gardening and landscaping and decided to go back in out of tech and back into landscaping and gardening as a business. And so spending the time outdoors, working with your hands, just adding value in a different way, finding a different way to create income streams outside of waiting for a corporate, 9-to-5 type of job. And then Insight Global, one of the large IT staffing companies that we're familiar with, Daham and I are familiar with, they've started marketing online. That traditionally they would hire IT contractor jobs. They have line cooks and HVAC technician jobs, not just IT jobs, on their website now. So as IT jobs have started to decline, we've seen staffing companies' recruiting efforts shift towards these blue collar workforce type of jobs and tradesmanship jobs as well. So interesting trend. Tom, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add before I move on.
And you said something that I think is really important. It's also it's kind of the perception is changing in terms of attractiveness. There's a very negative stigma that's present with the youngest workers in the workforce around corporate jobs. They used to be the most desirable, and we're definitely seeing attitudes and perceptions shift towards blue collar jobs actually being viewed as more desirable and more meaningful to their
and more stable, right? I feel like the Gen
well.
Z may have grown up with a Gen X parent who has lost their job and suffered a layoff and recession, and they're seeing this lack of loyalty and stability in their parents' employment. And therefore there's this lack of trust of corporate America. And I don't want a corporate job necessarily, right? And so, and just the whole student loans, cost of college, being saddled with all the debt. We'll talk a little bit later about all the debt from the college degrees. And so, I think especially the students that graduated in 2020 that may have delayed their college entry, that started to explore ways to earn money, may have decided to not go traditional 4-year bachelor's degree paths, which is leading again more towards people coming out with this tradesmanship knowledge of working in those non-traditional jobs.
Yeah.
All right.
Revaluing
I went backward. Sorry, I scrolled the wrong way. Out of control. Yeah. All right. This is another thing that we're seeing. So we're talked about companies needing to be more flexible and resilient in order to survive, not just continuing to do the things the way things have been done. We've talked to a lot of staffing firms as partners and as customers, and their revenue and profit is down somewhere in the ballpark of, I'm going to call it 25 to 40% since 2021, which was kind of like the hiring boom. And so we're talking with them about different ways to approach their business and move more towards project-based, solution-based work, right? Companies that have been doing layoffs and budget cuts aren't hiring people to backfill those roles. And so current workforce is even more burnt out and overwhelmed and stressed and doing more work for the same pay. We saw that for 2023, the SIA, which is Staffing Industry Analysts, forecast that the U.S. staffing market is experiencing a slight negative 2% year over year growth in comparison to record-breaking revenue years in 2021 and 2022 on the back of the COVID-19 rebound hiring. We also are looking at, when you're factoring in the impacts of U.S. inflation and not as much hiring and not as much structured growth projections for 2023, and then this competitive landscape of outsourcing to nearshore. Tom started to mention what we're seeing is the rise of moving to Latin America. And companies building global capability centers versus centers of excellence or global people centers. So it's not about staffing them up with as many people as they need. They're probably going to understaff them and add in some automation or AI components. And we talked about Microsoft building their AI IoT lab in Uruguay and in South America and Latin America. So it's their first of its kind in Latin America and outside of the United States. So our U.S. talent, our U.S. Tech workforce is now competing on an even more global scale for those necessary jobs. And companies are just looking for the most flexible, least costly and effective solutions. And sometimes that does not exist here in the United States.
Yeah, certainly a trend, and it's bolstered by the fact that private equity the investment banking community is very attuned to the effects of wage inflation, and that has a direct correlation to professional services businesses valuation. So as these wages increase and continue to increase with cost of living increases, on top of already high increases over the past few years, the aggregate value of these businesses is declining and is forecast to decline substantially into 2026. And so companies are responding by offloading US workloads to low-cost locations. And to Kate's point, those low-cost locations no longer are just L1 support. They can do everything up and down the stack, including advanced machine learning applications, bolstered by the innovation lab in Montevideo and the resources that companies like Microsoft, Google, Amazon are putting, NVIDIA are putting behind training programs and educational infrastructure in those nations. So it's definitely a challenging environment.
All right, I'm going to move on maybe a slightly quicker, hopefully. We're running tight to the top of the hour, Tom. Another interesting report from Harvard Business Review on trends shaping the workforce in 2024, linked below, are the types of perks and incentives that companies need to have outside of traditional salary and compensation that are attracting the workforce. And so I found some of this to be pretty interesting. So student loan repayment matching. So sort of like tuition assistance to go to college and get advanced degrees. Now, because of the 43 million Americans with student loan debt, companies, there's a tax code that allows companies to do student loan repayment matching as contributions, kind of like they contribute to a 401k, which I thought was interesting. The rise of the 4-day work week. I am an advocate and supporter. My summer is a 4-day work week. As a working mom and entrepreneur, to have longer weekends with my kids in the summer when they're off. We kind of mentioned the no more college degree requirements. Companies like Microsoft, Google, some of the FANGs have started to no longer require advanced degrees for their jobs. So work experience as trumping college degree requirements, even for some of the tech jobs. So no longer becoming a barrier of entry for some candidates. As we are preparing for the imminent retirement of our boomer generation from the workforce, we see that companies are needing to do more job rotation and cross training within those companies to allow for all of the knowledge that these boomers have obtained over their 20, 30-year careers to teach and train the Gen Zs of the workforce on those jobs. And so I mentioned the client that brought us in, someone had given them their 1-year retirement notice in order for proper succession planning and training. That doesn't always happen, especially amidst companies doing layoffs, but allowing for that knowledge transfer from the boomer generation. We've all seen companies start to think about mental health benefits, either providing access to telehealth therapy, including mental health benefits in their benefit plans, but also my husband works at Cisco. And Cisco gives them like one day a quarter as a mental health day or a me day. It's not aligned with any of the US holidays. It's not a PTO day. It's basically like this is a day off. And because everyone in the United States is off that day, you're not missing work. You're not feeling like you're going to be behind and that you have to catch up on emails and catch up on meetings and notes. And so it doesn't come with the guilt or the extra work and preparation that comes with when you're taking a normal PTO day. And then what we're seeing is this rise of financial planning and education. You talk about people graduating college with advanced degrees, very intelligent people that don't have basic financial knowledge and budgeting and planning and know how to track their spending. And so there's this gap in financial literacy, and we've seen companies start to add that as a perk and a benefit to help educate people, to help the average American get out of some of their financial strains and debt. And then one more fact before I move on to the next screen was the Gartner survey revealed 63% of candidates rated a 4-day work week as more important than same pay as a top new innovative benefit that would attract them to a new job. I don't know anyone that would argue against a 4-day work week. Well, maybe. All right, moving on to my last slide is we talked about the Great Recession and the Great Resignation and quiet quitting. The new words that I'm hearing now, this is a Forbes article, is the Great Disconnect, which is referring to this widening gap between what workers want and what employers are actually providing when it comes to flexibility, pay, and the whole employee experience. And so I think we're in what is being deemed as an era of the Great Disconnect. What this is a result of is we talked about the pay increases that happened back in 2021 and 2022, and then the slower to react companies increasing salaries. So this gap of pay expectation, this gap of pay transparency and fair play. Although now 60% of organizations are publishing pay rates and ranges in their job postings in 2024, because some states have led the effort of making that a requirement. Organizations have only increased and predict an average base pay increase of 4.5% in 2024, not keeping up with inflation and cost of living and the groceries. If any of us have gone grocery shopping this last couple of months, it's been very painful and expensive. We talked about the biggest challenges that companies facing this year. 50% of them say compensation is their biggest struggle with attracting talent. Again, because of that pay disparity and disconnect. Only half of organizations are training managers on how to have these pay conversations with future employees. We talked about the pros and cons of AI adoption. I, for one, am positive about adopting AI to do some of the repetitive manual tasks and things, grabbing some research, cleaning up some of my language, similar to like Grammarly and some of the other things. But we talked about that. And then the role of skill-based pay and the approach of valuing skills over degrees and valuing outcomes or productivity over time in the office. And about 1/3 of organizations have now removed degree requirements for their salaried positions and job postings. So I posted those links there. And then real quick, where is it going? Why is this so powerful at this time? How do we think we're part of the solution and the answer and not the problem? Companies that don't have the right tools in their toolkit. So thinking outside the box, not continuing to only think of traditional hiring. Don't block yourself with only hiring full-time employees, but access this top talent that is available, not just as a full-time employee or a full-time contractor, but get the talent that you need for the right amount of time at the right price. All these people that we talked about that we know that are really intelligent, really skilled, highly intelligent people are available to come in and help you solve your problem. Just be creative about how you structure that statement of work and get that talent in the door. They can quickly help you solve problems that might have taken you guys months of discussions and brainstorming and debating, because they bring in a new outside perspective and experience. The average employee wants more control over their time. The companies need more control over their labor costs. We talked about building hybrid teams and global teams or super teams and how we can replace some of the work with AI So those blend of a human intelligence and a human talent with the artificial intelligence. We talked about blending that subject matter expertise, job fractionation of an industry SME with maybe a technologist or AI specialist. And we talked about how trust is at an all-time low and risk is at an all-time high. And we're trying to help people hire talent smartly. I'm going to skip this and just get to the end because we run out of time and it's at 12:01. And I really, here's how you can connect with us. Here's the link QR code for that video from last year's projections and predictions. Here's how to connect with us. Tom and I would love to continue this conversation with you at a later time and see how we can partner with you or help you as you are exploring creative solutions to your challenges and your problems. Tom, anything you want to leave the audience with before we let them go?
Suffice it all to say, companies need to think differently, and we all need to think differently about the challenges ahead of us and how to position ourselves as more specialists and problem solvers who can generate ROI. So it's a very different time in the industry, but one that still has opportunities. They're just going to be harder to find. And we are well positioned to help you find a solution to the problem that's plaguing you. So thank you everyone for your time. And as Kate said, you can get in touch with us, contact information. We'll be happy to talk to you. And we look forward to, Kate, I'm sure you look forward to telling me how I'm wrong next year.
Favorite time of the year.
All right, y'all.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
I'm going to stop my recording.